Hi, Cougars. For National Library Week, I'm going to read Aunt Chip and the Great Triple Creek Dam Affair, written and illustrated by the wonderful Patricia Polacco, and published by Philomel Books. Absolutely everybody in Triple Creek loved their TV sets. No one could remember a time when there wasn't a TV in every home. Nor could they remember when they weren't watching TV. TVs were always on. While they ate their meals, while they worked, while they played, while they slept. They even kept photos of their TVs on their mantles, along with all the pictures of their family members. Everyone loved their TVs, except for Eli's Aunt Charlotte. Aunt Chip, as Eli called her, didn't even own a TV. As a matter of fact, she had never owned a TV. This made her suspect in the eyes of the townsfolk of Triple Creek, especially since she had upped and taken to her bed well over 50 years ago and vowed to never get out of it again. No one knew why, really, although there was some talk that it happened just about the time the huge TV tower was built over on Cedar and Oak. "I'm taking to my bed and I ain't ever getting up again," they say she shouted out of her window. "But there will be consequences. Mark my words. There will be consequences." And she settled into her eiderdown. Eli loved his Aunt Charlotte very much, in spite of her strange ways. He visited her almost every day. He especially loved when she would start into one of her great stories, like the one about the little kid in Holland who held back the sea by putting his thumb into the dike, or his favorite about a great white whale that lived in the deepest, darkest part of the ocean. "Where do you get all them stories, Aunt Chip?" he asked one day. "Some come out of the thin air, some come out of my dreams, some come right out of books." Books? Eli thought for a long time. How do you get a story from a book? "Whatever do you mean, how, child?" "I mean, we use books all the time. They're all over town, but..." "Use them? You mean read them, don't you?" she asked, leaning closer to the boy. "Read? What's that?" Eli asked. "I knew it. I knew there'd be consequences," Aunt Chip hissed as she threw off her covers and for the first time in 50 years let one foot touch the floor. "Child, give me my clothes," she ordered. "How come you're getting up, Aunt Chip?" Eli asked. "'Cause I suspect there's a wrong that needs to be put right," she said. "And I've got to see what happened for myself." Eli and Aunt Chip walked into the center of town. Eli was right. Books were being well used. For doorstops, to hold up roofs, to sit on, to eat off of, to sleep under, to mend fences, to stuff potholes, to prop up sagging buildings, and to even shore up the dam. "Where has everyone gone?" Aunt Chip asked, stunned in amazement. "There aren't any children playing. I don't hear talking or laughing." "Everyone's watching," Eli answered with authority. "It's almost time for a cliffhanging episode of How the Dawn Churns." "There have been consequences indeed," Aunt Chip said. Then, as they reached the corner of Cedar and Oak, Aunt Chip's eyes beheld the still strutted TV tower. She choked with tears. "Take me home, boy. I've seen enough. That afternoon they sat in front of the fire, sipping very strong tea. Do you want to know what glory used to stand on the corner of Cedar and Oak? What, Aunt Chip? Eli climbed up next to her. That's where the library used to be, she said. What's a library? Eli asked. It's a place where books used to be kept. A long time ago, she said wistfully. Why did they keep books in a building? Eli asked. They kept them there for folks to borrow and take home and read. Look, child. And she went to a cabinet covered with cobwebs, took out a book, and opened it for him. Dust fluttered off its pages. Now look at this. Those are words. They tell about ideas, dreams, and feelings. They take you to places far, far from here. They show how to be fair and just, and sometimes shows you what happens when you're not. Books are a treasure. All you need is the key. The key? Eli asked. The key! Knowing these words and their meanings, she answered. It's called reading. But Aunt Chip, if the library had all those treasures, why would anyone take it away? Well, sir, she started, folks got so taken up by those TVs that they came to the library less and less. Pretty soon, folks started to forget what it was there. All except the librarian. She was there, all right, every single day. Folks started calling her mad for sitting in that old empty building day after day. Finally, they carried her away. Crazy as a March hare, everyone said. She was trying to stop the wrecking ball, but it still crashed into the walls and flattened the place. Then that giant TV tower came. Eli looked again at the open book they both held in their hands. I want to read, Aunt Chip. Can you teach me? Of course, child, she said as she hugged him. Now, Eli took to reading like a beaver takes to gnawing on wood, or a flea takes to a dirty little yellow dog. Within weeks, he could read just about everything, and he did. He read labels on cereal boxes, covers on canned goods at the store, road signs, all those things folks had memorized by their shapes. It wasn't long before his little classmates at school, where TV sets had long since replaced teachers, noticed that he knew what things said on labels, covers, and such. Look, Eli can hear things that we can't, Celeste Appleby said one day. Eli was reading a peanut butter cookie recipe from one of Aunt Chip's cookbooks. How come we can't hear what you're hearing when we look at this book? Hollis Lunsberry asked. I'm not a-hearing it, Eli said. I'm a-reading it. It's kind of like I can see it talking. Read more. The other children clamored, and each one grabbed a book from a nearby pothole and held it up for Eli. Eli read about a princess in a kingdom. He read about isosceles triangles, and he read about the sinking of the Titanic. At last, one boy announced, We want to read too, Eli. And they all cheered, yes. That's when Eli told the children about Aunt Chip. All right, she said when they asked. But I don't have enough books. We'll need more. That's when the children started borrowing books from all over town. They took them out of the potholes, off fences, from the tops of roofs, out from under the sagging buildings. They borrowed and borrowed, They got them from anywhere they could find them. Pretty soon, Aunt Chip's house echoed with small voices reading from Aesop's fables and Grimm's fairy tales and stories by Hans Christian Andersen and Charles Dickens. Now those children couldn't get enough. One day, Eli and his friends were passing under a very tall wall, made entirely out of books on the edge of town. The original wall had crumbled, and the townsfolk had rebuilt it. Eli was reading the spines of each book in the wall, when his eye caught the gold lettering of a lovely green one. "Help me up so I can reach it." He could hardly wait to touch it. The children stood on each other's shoulders until Eli's fingers could finally reach the book. "Moby Dick!" he exclaimed as he pried it loose. Moby Dick slushed out of the wall with a watery, wet "Got it," he said. That was when they all heard it. A low, rumbling sound that grew louder and louder. They looked up and noticed that a small trickle of water coming out from where Moby Dick had been. The trickle got bigger and bigger. The rumbling got louder and louder. The ground under their feet started to shake, and they noticed that they were ankle deep in water. "Let's get to the bluff," Eli called out. When they reached the bluff and looked down, they saw it. The wall of books had become the new Triple Creek Dam, and it was bowing under the weight of the lake behind it. Then, with a thundering, watery roar, it exploded. The explosion sent the books flying straight up. They hurtled so high into the air that they disappeared clean out of sight. Tons of water surged down past Dead Man's Bluff and past the Bucket of Suds Saloon, and was heading straight for the TV tower next to the bridge at Cedar and Oak Streets. The wall of water hit that tower with such force that it crumpled up like tin foil. When the children got into town, they saw all the grown-ups walking around looking confused and dazed. "My TV went off, for no reason at all," a woman said as she grasped the photo of her TV to her chest. "I can't live without my sports recap of the replay of Sunday's game," a hysterical man screamed as he collapsed with a serious case of the vapors. "Who could have done such a thing to our town?" the mayor called out in anguish, clutching his remote control. "It's all my fault," Eli finally said above the din. Aunt Chip came and stood by his side. "All I wanted to do was read this book." Eli held up the copy of Moby Dick. "Read? Did you say read?" the mayor said as the townsfolk recoiled in disbelief. "Why, folks haven't done that around here, since I can remember. If we were meant to read, we would have been born being able to do it. It must have been bad if in doing it made the dam break and take out the TV tower." The crowd roared in agreement. "Just who taught you how to read?" the mayor asked as he drew closer to Eli. Eli gestured to Aunt Chip, and there was a collective gasp. "I knew it. I've heard stories about her," a voice said. "Crazy old coot," a man hissed. "She isn't crazy," Eli screamed. All the children came out of the crowd and surrounded Aunt Chip. "She's been teaching all of us to read. So we've been borrowing books from all over town," Eli said. "Well, that's where they've been disappearing to," a mean-looking woman said. You'll just have to put them all back, she snapped. They'll do nothing of the kind, Aunt Chip said with resolve. 50 years ago, I didn't have the strength to stand up to the city fathers, but now I do. As she locked her hands with the children, Eli looked at his Aunt Chip. It was you. You were the librarian. That's why you took to the bed. If we were meant to read, there surely would have been a sign, the town soothsayer said, as she gazed at the horizon. Well, sir, exactly at that very moment, all of them books that had been blown up out of the dam started to fall right out of the sky. Look, a child said excitedly. It's raining books. Sure enough, as the crowd looked skyward, down came a shower of books. Fairy tales, classics, dictionaries, encyclopedias, fiction, non-fiction. Black books, brown ones, green ones, red ones, leather-bound, canvas-backed, paperback. Books, books, and more books. This is a miracle, the town soothsayer exclaimed. And for the first time in years, the townsfolk were filled with wonder that only a child knows. They embraced one another and danced with joy that such a glorious thing had happened to them. Clearly, it was a sign. But the miraculous event had taken their eyes off the TV screens long enough to finally see what their town had become. I had no idea, the mayor said sadly. I told him there'd be consequences, Aunt Chip said. But you can change all this. Get to reading again, Titus, she said. That's a start. But none of us know how to read, a very large man said as he stepped out of the crowd. A little girl came up to him. I'll teach you, Daddy, she said quietly as she took his hand. Then one by one the townsfolk stepped forward, and one by one they were joined by their children or grandchildren, a chorus of small voices saying the same thing over and over. I'll teach you, Mama. I'll teach you, Papa. Well, sir, Triple Creek wasn't the same after that glorious day. Folks were fixing up their homes and rebuilding, thanks to books on remodeling and building that they were reading. They were planting gardens and parks because of the books on gardening, and they were sitting on their front porches again and talking to one another. Rousing conversations and laughter could be heard everywhere as folks talked about magazines, books, and newspapers. Understand, folks still had their TVs all right, but they were wise about what they watched and for how long. They had so much else to do, and people began moving to Triple Creek in droves. A Chinese restaurant, a theater, and a movie house that brought in movies from as far away as Moose Jaw, clear in the Upper Peninsula, opened. Giovanni Gargonzola, the world-renowned tenor, came and started a real opera company. Finally, a new school was built where the old one had stood, with real teachers and lots of books, including a 322-page book, Moby Dick. But the folks were most proud of their new library. Did you know the ribbon-cutting ceremony attracted dignitaries from all over the country, including Jubilation T. Fogbound, the great senior senator from our great state of Michigan? But it was the mayor who escorted the new town librarian into the new building and sat her at her desk personally. She, once again, took her rightful place, which had been hers 50 years before. Now, I said that a great many stories are true, though some may not have happened. You'll have to judge for yourself about this one. But next time you hear about a library being closed, you'll know that there will be consequences. And if you hear folks say there won't be, just have them read this here book. As for Eli, well, he grew up, went off to college, and studied journalism. He came back to Triple Creek about 8 years ago and started the town newspaper. He called it the Triple Creek Herald-Consequence. I've heard that that little paper won an international award for first-class journalism and excellence just last year. He keeps the trophy right on the shelf behind him, next to a tattered, well-loved copy of Moby Dick.